Supreme Chancellor Obi-Wan Kenobi by Stone Freak. Chapter 48. Palpatine schemes. Obi-Wan worries. Yoda worries. Anakin and Ahsoka spar. Palpatine absently swirls the deep red wine in his glass with a calm expression on his face. He's gone through his datapads, his messages, his flimsy, and every report he still has, every bit of information he's managed to keep away from the nosy corruption investigators. There is something missing. He knows there was one report from Kamino that references the inhibitor chips inside the clones. No details, of course not, but the mere reference. He grits his teeth and just barely refrains from snarling. It must have been in his office, which means Kenobi has most likely found it. Is that why he went looking in the systems? Unfortunately, Palpatine cannot see what file triggered the virus failsafe, nor who neutralized it. So perhaps it was the mention of the chips that sent Kenobi into sensitive data looking for more clues. If so, it's a potential disaster in the making. There is nothing overt in the Senate systems and reports. It would have been the height of sloppiness to allow such a thing. But there is just enough information to send Kenobi to Kamino to find out more. If he gets a spy to the Kaminoans, who goes through their systems, well, he'd find out that there is more to the chips than regulating clone personalities. Palpatine takes a deep breath and calms the burning rage by imagining many new ways for Kenobi to suffer. Imagines him living just long enough to see the fall of the entire order. How lovely the anguish on his face would be. Palpatine allows himself to idly ponder how the assassin will set up Kenobi's death. He hopes it will be painful. He hopes Kenobi suffers in his last moments. Ah, what a sight it would make. Calmer, he turns his attention back to his dilemma. Has Kenobi found information about the clone chips? Or... He glances at the pile of information idly. He had been going over mission reports just before the whole debacle went down. There were reports he did not finish altering. Has Kenobi found those? Did he go looking in the system to try and find other reports that had been changed? Palpatine takes a sip from his glass. Not good, but preferable. Even if Kenobi and his fellow Jedi find out that missions across the decades have changed just slightly between the Senate setting them up and them being sent over to the Jedi, well, there's not much they can do about it, is there? Systems have been unsettled as planned, the most important missions have failed as needed, and key Jedi players have already been taken out, though Kenobi has proven frustratingly incapable of dying as he was supposed to! There's nothing specific linking Palpatine to the edits, so he has little to fear in that area. He didn't do it on his own terminals. He didn't do it with his own login for the Senate systems. And even if he did attach notes to those particular files, which were still unchanged in his office, well, that's no real proof. It's an easy spin.
Oh, I just thought Master Kenobi would be a good fit for the mission. I was merely planning to take it up with the Council when discussing the mission with them.
Plausible deniability. He cannot move too hastily, or he risks setting all his plans aflame himself. No, he must stay calm. Kenobi will be dealt with. The investigation will not find enough to send Palpatine to prison or anything even close to that. At most, it will be a fine. After all, Palpatine smirks. He ensured that most of the truly illegal things were dealt with by Mas Amida. So easily led, all weaklings who hunger for power are. Those who seek it without truly understanding what real power is. So easily swayed, so easily moved across the Corellian chessboard that is the galaxy. Kenobi has proven himself to be a far better player than Palpatine had anticipated, holding a keener mind than Palpatine would have assumed, all things considered. No wonder Dooku, the Dagobah slime worm, always spoke highly of him. Soon enough, however, Kenobi's skills and sharp mind will not matter. Palpatine has made his move, and Kenobi will not see the knife before it meets its target. And then, game over. Obi-Wan rubs his eyes, staring blankly at the datapad before him without really seeing it. Exhaustion is creeping up on him, and he knows he needs to stop, for now. Stop, go back to the temple, catch up on some sleep, and start over tomorrow. He won't make any progress if he's too tired to think straight anyway. He puts the pad down on his desk and leans back in his chair, sighing deeply. He's used every free moment he's had to go through Palpatine's papers, documents, notes, anything he can gain access to find more information about those inhibitor chips mentioned in the correspondence with Kamino. Despite weeks of looking, he has come up empty. There is nothing in the files at all, or if there is, it's well hidden and beyond his skill to find them. He pushes away from the desk and stands up. He needs sleep. He's not at his best right now. Perhaps he's missing something. Perhaps there is some sort of clue that he's just not seeing right now. Shaking his head, he moves away from the desk, heading toward the security room. He'll let the troops know he's going back to the temple for the night. It's possible one of them will demand to see him back to the temple, likely citing commander's orders or something. He opens the door and steps inside, mind made up. The troopers look up at him, and as soon as Obi-Wan is sure he has all of their attention, he says, "I'll be going to the temple for the night. I won't be back in the office until tomorrow morning." "Understood, General. I will accompany you to the temple then." Blast, head of the night shift, says with a nod. He glances to the rest of the troopers, who will nod in understanding, before he gets up and leaves his station, running one hand over his mohawk as he moves to Obi-Wan's side. "That'll be good, Captain." The prospect of sleep is too tantalizing, and Obi-Wan's simply too wrung out to even consider arguing. He might as well take Blast up on the offer. He won't have to fly the speeder if he does. Of course, Obi-Wan giving in so easily makes Blast and the other troops on the night shift look suspiciously at him. He pays it no heed and simply makes his way out of the office, Blast just half a step behind him. The fresh air, as fresh as it ever gets on Coruscant, is soothing. The coolness of the night washes over Obi-Wan as he steps outside and heads to the speeders. Still, there's a feeling of disquiet that refuses to leave, a constant small humming like an electric charge in the air, disturbing his thoughts and any chance of a lasting sense of peace. Something is coming, something very important, something that, depending on its outcome and the actions taken, will determine the fate of the galaxy. Obi-Wan can feel it in his very bones, his prescience all but screaming it at him. Any time he reaches for the feeling in the Force, however, it slips away like a Dartha eel. The Force is still too muddled, too darkened, for him to truly be able to see clearly. The feeling of hurtling ever closer to a crash without being able to see what he will crash into is disconcerting. It disturbs his sleep and throws him off of balance. Oh, what a tempting thing sleep is right now, but Obi-Wan knows it will continue to elude him, at the very least until this feeling abates. He gets into the passenger seat and relaxes as Blast starts the motor and flies off, heading towards the temple immediately. Obi-Wan allows himself a few minutes of closed eyes without thought before he opens his eyes and takes his comlink out of his pocket. He stares idly at it and ponders. Should he? "We should reach the temple in 3 minutes, General," Blast says, never taking his eyes off the flight lanes despite the late hour and the mild traffic. Well, mild for Coruscant anyway. The core city never truly sleeps after all. "Thank you, Blast." Obi-Wan closes his eyes and takes a deep breath before punching in a number sequence he's known by heart for years. It's late. He knows as much. But perhaps... "Yoda, this is..." Of course Master Yoda isn't asleep yet. Obi-Wan had hoped as much. "Master Yoda, it's Obi-Wan. I'm heading back to the temple for the night." He pauses, biting his lip, and considers once more if he should really... "Yes. I was wondering if perhaps you'd join me for a cup of tea once I arrive." Yoda lets out a dismissive snorting noise, almost grating with its loudness. "Tea you do not need. Sleep you do." Master Yoda grumbles, his words punctuated with the sound of his gimmer stick rapping against the floor. Yes, Master, but..." Obi-Wan starts. He knows he needs sleep, but it's frustratingly out of his reach. He hoped that perhaps a cup of tea with Yoda could have soothed his nerves, but if Master Yoda isn't willing, then... Before he can finish his sentence, however, Master Yoda interrupts him. "Go to the chambers, we will. Tea I will bring, share it we will, and then sleep you will." Obi-Wan only barely chokes down the relieved laugh bubbling in his chest. Yes, Master, thank you. They say their goodbyes. Obi-Wan is certain he hears Master Yoda mutter something about unruly crushlings and closes the connection. Obi-Wan opens his eyes and stares ahead. In the corner of his eyes, Obi-Wan can see Blast glance at him, and the Force around him seems almost pleased. Obi-Wan allows himself a small smile and relaxes into his seat. The rest of the trip back to the temple passes swiftly. Blast is a far better flyer than Anakin. Far less speeding and acrobatics that make Obi-Wan's stomach burn. Obi-Wan says his goodbyes to Blast at the temple entrance, but he's very aware that the speeder doesn't take off again until he's inside the temple itself. He huffs and smiles slightly, shaking his head. If nothing else, it's good to know that there are people who will have his back. He stops once he's inside, just for the briefest of moments. There's a special feeling inside the temple, perhaps owing to generation upon generation of Force sensitives walking its halls, living within them. It is home in a way no other place in the galaxy could possibly be. It's late, so there are few Jedi still awake. The younglings will be asleep in the creche, draped on top of each other in piles. The knights and masters in their rooms, either in bed or preparing for it. Still, he passes a few Jedi still awake. The temple, much like Coruscant, never truly sleeps. He smiles as he passes by the gates to the gardens. There is something in the very essence of them that speak of joy. Many happy childhood memories are made there. Obi-Wan knows that for a fact. And that joy lives on in the leaves of every plant and every single blade of grass. It's amazing what can be retained in the Force, even without an active attempt to do so. Were he to be forced to leave this place behind, Obi-Wan knows he would miss it dearly. He would accept its loss for accepting change, even if you cannot embrace it, is the way of the Jedi. But he would miss it for the rest of his life, nevertheless. It's a silly thought, one most likely brought on by exhaustion and stress coupled with his current situation. What reason could there possibly be that would force him to leave the temple behind? Obi-Wan shakes his head at his own line of thinking. He may be Supreme Chancellor, but it's only temporary. He will not become a full-time politician. Beyond Obi-Wan deciding to leave the Order on his own, there really is little chance, if any, he would be forced from its halls. He continues through familiar hallways and turbo lifts until he finally reaches his rooms. Once he places his hand on the scanner pad, the door slides open, and the scent of Walian tea washes over him like a fragrant wave. He smiles at the nostalgia of it all and steps inside to greet Master Yoda. Sleep well, Yoda's great-grand Padawan still does not. See it, Yoda can. Something on Obi-Wan's mind there must be, if help he asks for. Sit down, he does, with a smile. I haven't had Walian tea since I left the creche, Master Yoda, says Obi-Wan. Takes the cup, he still does. Grew up too soon, this little one did. Carried the galaxy on his shoulders, he always has.
Help sleep this tea does. Help prescient younglings, does it? Need it, I think you do,
says Yoda, and his own tea sips on. Nothing Obi-Wan says, and his tea sips he. Speak first, Yoda will not. Let Obi-Wan gather his thoughts, he must. Uncomfortable silence is not. Lived long enough to not be bothered by it, Yoda has. Something is coming, Master, the outcome of which will determine the fate of the galaxy. I feel it in every atom, and yet I cannot glean anything more detailed. A long drink he takes. I don't know how, I don't know what, I don't know when. I just know it's coming. It's a constant buzzing in the back of my head, and it disturbs my sleep and ability to concentrate. A pause. I'm worried. If worried he admits to afraid, he likely is, Yoda concludes. A bird in prescience can be without or with visions.
Feel it, I do, murmurs Yoda. Meditated on it much, have I, but found answers I have not.
Similar their situations are. Spread, silence does again. Gather their thoughts, they do.
Remain vigilant, we must, but fear it, we must not. Sleep and rest, we must. Your sleep I will guard tonight, like when crushling you were.
Thank you, Master. Later it is, sitting next to his finally sleeping great-grand Padawan, that Yoda allows the worries to come to the forefront of his mind. Right, young Obi-Wan is. Coming, something is. If two who have noticed they are, then warn others they must. Speak with the council tomorrow, Yoda will. Clouded the Force is. See clearly he cannot. The Sith it likely involves. How, Yoda cannot say. Vigilant they must be, but fear it they must not. Or lost they already have. A meditative trance Yoda enters. In the shroud of the Force, the night passes. The buzzing sound of lightsabers moving through the air and clashing together, coupled with panting breaths and two sets of footsteps, are the only things that can be heard in the emptied mess hall. The troopers were more than willing to help move the tables out of the way to create a large enough empty space for Anakin and Ahsoka to duel. Now they watch in fascination as the two Jedi move around each other, parrying blows and avoiding strikes. Anakin grins widely as they spar, pride like a burning flame in his chest. Ahsoka is getting good. Where two blades sets Anakin slightly off balance, leaving one arm awkwardly swinging without proper aim or real intent. Two blades gives Ahsoka extra balance and a sharpness to her technique she lacked before. Her twirls are tighter with fewer openings, and both blades become extensions of her arms. She's not quite there yet with her technique, and her moveset is still too limited to use in real battle, but he can see the skill she'll one day have. One day she might even overtake him and Obi-Wan both. But not yet. With one swift movement, he breaks her guard and stops his blade at her chest, arms still bent and able to thrust forward. Had he been an enemy, her chest would be pierced now. "Sala!" she says through panting breaths and retracts her blades. Anakin follows suit and settles into a relaxed stance. There is some scattered applause from the gathered troopers, but Anakin deliberately puts it out of his mind. "You're getting good, Snips." "Thank you, Master." Her grin is wide and infectious, and together they head to one of the tables to sit down for a bit. The water is blessedly cool as it slips down his parched throat. "Ah, I want a nap!" Ahsoka grumbles into her glass of water, prompting a snort from Rex. "Aren't you a little old for that, Commander?" Rex looks like bantha butter would melt in his mouth, but Anakin can see the spark of mischief in his eyes. Considering Ahsoka's put-out look, she can too. "I haven't taken naps since I was in the creche, but that doesn't mean I've lost the appreciation for a good nap, Captain." And there's the snippiness in Ahsoka that Anakin never snips in the first place. Rex, of course, only rolls his eyes with a smile. Naps in the creche, huh? Obi-Wan mentioned that when he was in the creche, they used to sleep in piles. Did you do that too? Anakin asks, thinking back to when he and Obi-Wan cleared the air between them while looking at Ahsoka. She blinks in surprise. "Oh, yeah, we did. I kind of miss it. Sleeping in one big cut-up pile was pretty great, actually," she says with a nod. She looks a bit far away and nostalgic, perhaps remembering some nice naps. "You and your age mates didn't sleep in piles, General?" Five asks, picking up on some of what Anakin isn't saying. Feeling everyone's eyes on him, Anakin scratches the back of his head a bit self-conscious. "Well, actually, I was never in the creche at all." He was prepared for the surprised looks, but it still makes him feel slightly awkward. "You weren't in the creche, Master?" Ahsoka says, her eyes huge. Consider the occasional rumors going through the temple, Anakin would actually have assumed that she knew that, but apparently not. "No, I came to the temple late under unusual circumstances, so I actually became Obi-Wan's in-temple Padawan immediately, rather than go to the creche first." Anakin pauses and thinks back to those early days. Sometimes he misses them, though he had never liked that Obi-Wan was gone so much. Shaking himself out of his thoughts, he continues. "So I either stayed with Master in our rooms, or in the initiate dorms." "Wait, so what's the difference between the creche and the initiate dorms?" Jesse asks. Scratching his bald head, Anakin glances at Ahsoka and gives her a small nod. She'd know way better than he would. Well, she begins. "The creche is where all the younglings live. They're the youngest of the Jedi Order. There are several small clans, as we call them, groupings of younglings who take classes together and such. They usually sleep on these big soft mats with lots of pillows and blankets, and usually really close together, so almost in piles, like I said. She pauses. You don't have to sleep in the piles, of course. The mats are really big, so some tend to gravitate to the edges because they like sleeping more solitarily. Also, there are younglings whose species require slightly different room humidity or temperature to be fully healthy, like monk calamari or nautilins. Usually they all sleep together regardless of what clans they belong to.
Huh. Yeah, that makes sense. Master used to say that Bant was his crush mate, but her rooms were always much, wetter than the ones he shared with Obi-Wan at the time. The initiate dorm, though, that's more like, well, several rooms with bunk beds, really. Anakin says, recalling his time in the dorms. They're large enough that a few people can share them if they want to, though. But it's not quite conducive to bio sleeping. I assume they don't want you to go straight from constant closeness to being completely shut off from physical contact. Gake's remarks, just now, looking up from the datapad he was writing something on.
Yeah, I think so. Some species need physical contact to thrive, so at least that's what Crushmaster Anharang used to say.
Ahsoka says between gulps of water. Scattered mumbles of, yeah, makes sense, and sounds about right. Fill the room for a moment, and Anakin relaxes. They'll probably leave the topic behind now. Just as Anakin thinks this, however, Ahsoka speaks up.
Master, what's an in-temple Padawan? I mean, how does it differ from a regular Padawan?
Oh, right. Anakin leans his head on his fist, elbow on the table, and considers it. Ahsoka is probably too young to remember. After all, there never were many, and ever since the war, the Order has been forced to change things around to be able to spread as thinly as they've had to. He sees the troopers' confusion. Considering that it's a Jedi thing, they probably expected her to know, too. Right, I guess you're too young to know, huh? They're not really a thing anymore because of the war, and they were never especially common even before it. Obi-Wan would probably explain this so much better. Theoretical explanations aren't really Anakin's forte, unless it's about mechanics and electronics, since he's more of a hands-on type of guy. So what is it, General? Well, the age limit to become a Padawan used to be the species equivalent to a 15-year-old human before the war. That's why I questioned you if you were really old enough to be back on Christophsis. Ahsoka. Anakin scratches the back of his head. Sometimes, though, there could be circumstances that made someone younger than their 15 equivalent become a Padawan. But since they'd be too young, they wouldn't really leave the temple. So when their masters were in the temple, and they would usually stay for long stretches of time because of their temple-bound Padawan, the in-temple Padawan would live with their master, but go to classes with the initiates. When their master was on missions they couldn't go on, they'd stay in the initiate dorms. It's not really a complicated concept. It was to keep the young members of the Order safe, you know. Anakin squirms in the silence that started spreading the more he talked. And yeah, he knows it sucks that kids are on the front lines now. It sucks a lot. But he doesn't really know what they can do about it, short of just stop being commanders and generals, and they can't do that, can they? He'll have to ask Obi-Wan about that, or someone else on the council. Though Obi-Wan is probably a safer bet if he wants a straightforward answer.
So, they didn't go on missions?
Ahsoka looks like she can't quite wrap her head around the thought. Considering how her own Padawan ship is gone, that probably isn't weird. I mean, I started being allowed to go on missions with no expected danger when I was 12. And yes, sometimes unforeseen circumstances would mean we'd end up in some danger anyway, but that was usually not the point. I mean, my first mission was to, I don't remember the name, but it was some planet that holds a fertility festival every 5 years.
What?
Someone hisses through coughs as if their drink went down wrong.
Anakin looks around to see huge eyes and slack jaws. Wait, what are they?
No! Not like sexual fertility, plant fertility. They had a festival with a ritual to have good crops. They wouldn't have let me go near it if it was a sex thing. I was 12!
The words start tumbling out of Anakin's mouth as fast as he can make them because by the force of mental images! Going to a sex fertility festival with his master when he was 12 would have been a straight-up nightmare of awkward. Right.
Ahsoka squirms a bit in her seat, looking a bit like she's choking down giggles. Anakin probably looks about as awkward as he feels.
So what was the mission?
The ritual is really old and contains having someone use the Force to lift a cup from a pedestal, hold it in the air for a few minutes while some shamans chant, and then set it down again. So the Jedi have been doing that for centuries. Like I said, it wasn't a dangerous mission. That was mostly the kind of mission any in-temple Padawan was allowed to go on.
Oh, that's different,
Ahsoka says with a wince. It was boring.
Anakin says and laughs when Ahsoka gives him a sheepish smile.
Yeah, there was no hiding how boring that mission was. The planet itself was pretty and all, and the locals were really nice, but the mission? Ugh! So you don't do in-temple Padawans anymore? There's a sharp look in Rex's eyes. Anakin shakes his head. No. With how spread thin we are, we need all the hands-on deck we can get. You used to become a Padawan at 15 and have a Padawan ship for about 8 to 10 years, but with how everything is now, we get put out in the field earlier and subsequently get more experience quicker and knighted earlier.
Anakin takes a long drink of water.
If you asked Obi-Wan, he would probably tell you even more traditions and ways of doing things that we've lost since the war. He knows better than I do.
No one says it, but Anakin is pretty sure they're all thinking the same thing.
Obi-Wan isn't really around to be asked these days. Another thing they've lost to the war.